Since the Cleveland Browns returned in 1999, there hasn't been a more significant offseason than the one we're currently living in. I'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Is this the most important Browns offseason since the team returned in 1999? I'll talk about why I think it is coming up here in a moment. Meanwhile, another Browns player is closing the door on Deshaun Watson and talking about quarterbacks. And then lastly, right now, it's a pie-in-the-sky hypothetical trade. But I have a quarterback trade that I think you and other Browns fans will absolutely love. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast and making us your first listen each and every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. And with that said, we get after it. And I don't want to come off as hyperbolic here. I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. But I do believe that this offseason that we are just a little under 2 weeks into for the Cleveland Browns is the most important offseason this franchise has faced since the team returned to Cleveland in 1999. I'm going to walk you through why. But I think the first part of this has to be like retracing our steps a little bit. You go back to 1999. I can understand where maybe some people believe, okay, that was the most important offseason because it was a chance to really set the tone with the franchise. Okay, but a lot of time expansion teams, which is kind of what this was. I mean, I know it was a promised, a promise from the NFL to reinstate a team into Cleveland. But it was a team that was starting sort of fresh from a standpoint of like, yeah, we're going to go get players, build a roster, all that. So I can understand why people might feel that way. But at the same time, like it was the first year of many to come. So it didn't have to be like the most important one. And then as you kind of walk through history, there might have been some years that you can think back to and be like, man, they had a first-round pick this year. They had a couple top picks this year, and they botched those picks. I'm not saying those years weren't important or didn't matter, and they could have been a stepping stone for the organization to turn things around sooner than they obviously have. I also think the next natural place people are going to go to when they think about the most important off seasons for this franchise is going to be the 16-17 seasons where the team just admittedly tanked and was trying to, get draft picks, accumulate as much draft capital as possible so that they could get good players and be near the top of the draft. And that paid off in the sense of, okay, you ended up with Myles Garrett. You ended up with Denzel Ward. You ended up with Nick Chubb. You ended up with David Njoku. You ended up with, at the time, a Baker Mayfield, several years ago. So, I think that certainly was the case in terms of like that being an important period of time. But there's a lot more there are a lot more layers to why this offseason I think carries even more weight than that one would have. And it does start with the premise that this past season there were such high expectations for this team, and they fell woefully short of those by going 3-14. That's I think the natural starting place, because when you have a season that doesn't go the way anybody expects and that has so much hype around it because the team is supposed to be good and they're supposed to be in a place to contend, and they were just in that boat a year ago making the playoffs. Like you're going to look out and be like, okay, pivotal off season. How many debates have been had over the last month or so over should the Browns just tank and do what they did in 16-17? Should the Browns try to sort of thread the needle and stay competitive? We've gone back and forth on those things, whether it's on this podcast, other, Cleveland sports shows, other Cleveland Browns podcasts, whatever it might be. And people have different opinions on it. Some think the best bet is to tank and draft that franchise quarterback and just trade Myles Garrett and all this stuff. Others think, and this is kind of the boat that I fall into, that the team is still good. The roster isn't as bad as it seemed this year, even though the 3-14 record speaks for itself. And you can still try to go out and win football games if you're able to get a few things right, most notably the quarterback position. So I understand why they're trying to go that route, but it certainly starts there with the idea that like it is a turning point, like it's a fork in the road off season in that way. You can either decide we're going to just sort of start fresh and try to rebuild this thing, or you can decide to do what it sounds like Andrew Berry and the Browns are going to do, which is let's find find the right moves for this team to get us back to contention and get us back to competitiveness and, be on our merry way trying to win next year. The other reason it's the most important one is because you do have the number 2 overall pick. And there are obviously a number of options you can go with this. You can draft a quarterback, and that might change your franchise forever if you get the right one. So, yeah, pretty pivotal decision-making there. If you don't draft one because you don't like these guys, you can still land a franchise staple cornerstone player, and that person could be part of this organization for years to come, contributing to this team. And so that still is a massive thing. And obviously, whatever they do at the quarterback position, that's going to dictate like where they kind of go from here. Maybe it sets them up to draft a quarterback next year. Maybe it sets them up with a guy who can win you for a couple years and sort of maximize this window of contention that they believe they still have for a little bit longer than what it might seem. So all those factors come into it. But I also think there's a fan factor involved here too, and an apathy factor here thrown into the mix as well. And what I mean by that is the Deshaun Watson trade and the Deshaun Watson situation has truly alienated a number of fans. And as not everybody, it's probably not even the majority of fans. And maybe you're part of this group. Maybe you're not part of this group. I guess if you're part of this group, you're probably not watching this podcast right now. So if you're watching this podcast, you probably aren't part of this group. But there is a contingent of Browns fans that have basically sworn off the team and want nothing to do with it because of the way the Deshaun Watson thing was handled and because the situation played out the way that it did. I can understand where that comes from. People were frustrated by this. We heard those frustrations kind of play out from, again, some fans at the stadium the day that Deshaun Watson got injured and went down with the Achilles injury, as some people celebrated the moment. Not the reaction that you really want from anybody, but it did happen. And we can't ignore that. We can't run from that. So knowing that, though, and knowing that there's been a lot, I've said it throughout the season, this was probably the first time in a long time, and really ever, that I've seen this fan base be this apathetic. And it's unfortunate because the Cleveland Browns are a historic organization with one of the best fan bases, by my estimation, in all of football. But you got the sense going to these games each week and covering this team that people were just like checked out, going through the motions, didn't really care. You felt it on social media. You felt it around the city. You felt it in that stadium. And that sucks. Like, I don't ever want to go to these games and know that like fans just don't care. And it's, it makes my job more fun when the fans are into it, involved, engaged, and they're having a good time and enjoying the season. So that was a true sense and a true feeling around this team this year because people were so checked out on it. You got to try to lure those people back in. Whether it's the ones who've said they're not going to be Browns fans anymore and they need something to get excited about and really ignite them to get their Browns fandom back, or whether it's just the ones who felt like this season was a waste and a wash and they're sort of, just disappointed in everything that's going on right now and that's surrounding the team right now, and they need something to get excited about. This offseason has to sort of inject some life into this fan base, which I never thought would be a thing because this fan base is so passionate, but it's true. And especially as you think about what's coming down the pike, a new stadium, trying to convince people that a new stadium in a new place, because it is moving out of downtown to Brook Park, assuming they get through all this litigation, okay, which I'm imagining they will. It's all just, political posturing. But regardless, you got to get people excited about that venture in 2029. You need to keep this thing on the track so that people have something to look forward to, not only in 2025, but in years to come. And so that part of this and that factor into this makes this, to me, feel like it truly is the most important Browns offseason since the team returned in 1999. It's about convincing the players on that roster that you're trying to stay competitive and make them still care. And it's about making the fan base still care. It is twofold. And so this organization, this front office, has a pretty tough task in front of them in trying to pull that off this offseason, get the team back to contention while also making the future look a little less bleak than it does right now for some people. Coming up, speaking of moving forward, another Browns star player is talking about the quarterback position and what the team needs at the quarterback position. We will talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes into play. If you love football and you want a chance to win some real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. You simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns. And for a shot to win 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. This week, I'm looking at Jared Goff over 230 passing yards plus Saquon Barkley, more than one touchdown. That one might be a little risky, but I like his odds to do it. They also have weekly promos like their Taco Tuesday discounts to add even more value to your lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, so Browns fans like yourself are not the only ones who have opinions about what the Browns should do at the quarterback position. There was a recent video that popped up this week from a TMZ, I don't know if you want to call it TMZ reporter, but a TMZ person approaching Denzel Ward in some city. I tried my damnedest to figure out where Denzel Ward was. It was not downtown Cleveland because there was no snow on the ground. So I'm guessing somewhere on the West Coast, somewhere in the South. I don't know. But Denzel Ward was approached in the city, and a TMZ reporter, whatever, approached him and started asking him about the quarterback position and what he thinks the Browns need to do at the quarterback position. So the first question that was asked was, do you think the team needs a good quarterback or should they be rebuilding the entire roster? Denzel's answer to that question was, I think we need a great quarterback for real. I think in the NFL, that's where it starts, that quarterback position. Once you get that solidified, then the rest of the team is going to follow and go carry along. I don't think we're too far off. We just need to solidify that position. There was some follow-up stuff asked. One of the questions was about Myles Garrett saying on Hard Knocks this week that the team ain't that bad and we're right there, like in terms of like being close. And if he agreed with that, and his answer was, I think we've got a good team for real, but we've got to solidify that quarterback position. If you've got the quarterback position, it's going to take you far. So doubling down on his commentary about the quarterback position and what the Browns need in his response to this TMZ reporter on camera. And this was caught on camera. I tried my best to verify it. It did not seem like it was AI, an AI version of Denzel Ward. It looks like the tried and true version of Denzel Ward answering these questions to TMZ. And just another fascinating look, I think, into the aura around this team right now and the vibes around this team right now, where it is evident that everybody saw the same thing that you saw, that I saw, that everybody saw watching the Browns this season, which was a team that did not have a very good quarterback. The offense was inept, and that everybody's on board with, like, we need to change this thing up. Now, some of this is made easier by the fact that it truly just feels like Deshaun Watson's time in Cleveland, maybe even the NFL, is over with the injury situation he's dealing with. He ruptured his Achilles once, re-ruptured his Achilles. Now he's basically going to miss. I am assuming here, and maybe it's wrong of me to assume, but it sure feels like he is going to miss all of next season. And I don't know what that means for his future in the NFL beyond that either. But the Browns, from everything they're saying, indicate that they are ready to move on. And his teammates coming out and saying some of the things that they're saying make it seem like they're ready to move on, because you have Jack Conklin on Locker Cleanout Day saying you can't build the offense around one player. You have Myles Garrett, when he made the comments initially about how, he could see himself playing somewhere else potentially. You have him mentioning that they got to get back to the offense that gave them success and being a ball control offense and all these different things, which is sort of a shot at Deshaun Watson, even if he sort of downplayed it afterwards. And then you have this. You have another star player talking about Deshaun Watson, not even Deshaun Watson directly, but the quarterback position not being good enough. And this all ties into the athletic article that we referenced on an earlier episode this week, where players in that locker room felt a sense of relief or like a weight lifted off their shoulders once Deshaun wasn't around anymore. And that doesn't mean that they were like rooting for the injury. I think I tried to clarify this yesterday. The Jason Lloyd, who wrote the article, he was on 92 through the Fan here in Cleveland, and he had talked about how he didn't think that meant teammates like quit on Deshaun and that they weren't there for him and to try to support him. Like they still supported him as one of their teammates. They still they use words like family and brotherhood in those locker rooms, and that was still the case with Deshaun. They still wanted to see him succeed, and they were still doing their part, if you will, to try to make that happen. But I think the problem is everybody sort of realized that there was, just bigger problems in play here and that he just wasn't really up for the challenge, or he just doesn't have it anymore as a player. He's just not that guy that gives you the best chance to win, and that he had lost a step and that something wasn't there anymore and that they need to upgrade the position. And I do think like the outside pressures and the outside noise and the outside, just problems that Deshaun brings did creep into the locker room a little bit. So it was sort of a breath of fresh air to have all of that not really around the team for a stretch of time. And you saw some good football, particularly from the offense that was historically bad at the beginning of the season under Deshaun Watson's guidance, where they win a couple games. They beat the Steelers. They beat the Ravens. Like, there were some moments there where it was like you could tell they were playing more free. And I talked about that apathy. I'm not saying it completely disappeared once Deshaun Watson was gone, but there was sort of a jolt of people feeling re-energized about the team, both from inside the locker room and outside the locker room, once that all played out. And once Deshaun was, off rehabbing on his own and doing his own thing and just not really around anymore. So again, this all just speaks to on an even deeper level, why it's time to move past and try to move on from the Deshaun Watson debacle. I don't know if we can sit here right now and dole out blame individually. This regime talks so much about it being a collaborative thing. Everything's a collaborative thing, or they're all thought partners is the phrase that they use, which is like the new, I got to watch the tape. Like it's just the crutch phrase that they fall back on when they don't want to put any blame on anybody or throw anybody under the bus. All right, fine, you're all thought partners. But if that's true, then as far as like assessing blame and trying to toll out like who's more responsible than this person or that person, like everybody has a hand in this on some level. If this was truly forced from above from Jimmy Haslam, then it's just the latest of boneheaded decisions that he's made during his tenure as the owner of this team. And again, I say that also being the person who admits it was done with the best intentions, because I can understand where Jimmy Haslam was thinking, hey, I want to go get a franchise quarterback. I'm tired of this position eluding us and us not having that player to put us over the top and make us a true Super Bowl contender. So I understand where the thought process was behind it, but they picked the wrong guy and they didn't vet the situation well enough. And that's where blame probably falls on Andrew Berry's lap. It was his job to truly assess and determine, A, if Deshaun was going to fit in Kevin Stefanski's offense, which, as I continue to say, clearly wasn't going to be the case. And that marriage from the beginning, that arranged marriage from the beginning, didn't seem like it was going to work, because that wasn't the style of offense that Deshaun Watson ran. So I scratched my head on why they felt like that was the like it was going to work, and they talked themselves into it and tried to sell him on it. And maybe that just comes again from the trump card of, well, the ownership wanted it to happen, so that's why it happened. But I put that on Andrew Berry, and I put on Andrew Berry the fact that they needed to have a better understanding of like where this guy was at mentally, because clearly that is not the same quarterback that was playing for the Houston Texans and looked confident and was seeing things better and could read the field night and day from what that guy was in Houston. And then I also think blame goes on Kevin Stefanski, because like on some level, he is responsible for the team's the results from this team. And when he's going out there every week saying he gives us the best chance to win, we still believe in Deshaun. And as the Jason Lloyd article also alluded to, maybe not calling Deshaun out in team meetings when they're watching film and seeing the same mistakes and misses that you and me and others saw, that's problematic as well, especially when we know from other reporting out there that what worked best for Deshaun in Houston was being pushed a little bit by the coaching staff and sort of, pushing him to be better and calling him out at times. And it doesn't seem like they had the right temperament or coaching for him either. So everybody deserves blame on some level. But the more and more we hear players talk about this, like, it's more and more evident that the quarterback position is the thing that everybody realizes is missing from this team to keep them from contending, and that it is truly time to close that door and take steps forward into figuring out what that position looks like, beyond the Deshaun Watson debacle that's played out over the last couple of years. Speaking of quarterback options, now listen, this is a pie in the sky scenario. It's as things stand right now on Friday, January 17th. There's no indication that this is going to happen, but I have a dream quarterback scenario, really a dream quarterback trade that I think Browns fans could get behind, including yourself. I will talk about it, tell you about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This message is from our sponsors and our partners at TurboTax. Are you tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you need one form or you need a bunch of forms, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on what really matters to you. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes for the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, I have a pie in the sky quarterback trade scenario that I think Browns fans would be on board with. Now, maybe I'll get some pushback on this as well. Maybe I'll get people just chiming in and saying, this is ridiculous. It's never going to happen. But I don't think it's as far-fetched as it seems. It all hinges on one key thing, though, and that is the Dallas Cowboys right now. And this is what's funny about this is we kind of are going to be held hostage to the Dallas Cowboys in this dream scenario here, which might loom large for a couple more weeks until they fill that void for their head coach. But the Dallas Cowboys don't have a head coach right now. They're looking to fill that void. And there are rumors aplenty across the NFL that Jerry Jones, who loves to get ideas and then they perpetuate in his head and snowball and he just can't let it go, is enamored with hiring Deion Sanders as the Cowboys' next head coach. And that Deion apparently, even though he put out a statement through Adam Schefter where he basically downplayed the whole thing and said, I'm honored, but I'm not interested. I'm going to stay at Colorado. Those things can change. People can always, be talked into things, especially when money is involved. You can always convince somebody to go the direction you want them to go or take a job based on what you're going to pay them. So these things can change pretty rapidly, and they do in the NFL. So there was a recent report from Ed Werder that also said Deion's actually, his camp is kind of trying to encourage him to take this position if it's offered to him, and that he should pursue it and all these different things. So there's different reporting out there that this might be in play, and it could be something that's being discussed behind the scenes, and that maybe Deion could be convinced to come back to the team he played for and join the Dallas Cowboys. So it's an interesting move. It's an interesting situation. If that happens, though, and again, it's a big if at this point. We don't have any indication it's going to happen, just sort of reporting on the potential that it does. I have a trade scenario that I think Browns fans would absolutely be on board with. And if you're sort of, connecting the dots on this, it would basically be because, listen, if Deion Sanders takes the Cowboys job, we know what he wants. He wants his son. He wants to get Shedeur Sanders to come be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. That's just, flat out, that's what's going to happen here. So, if you're the Browns, you're in a position where you could trade the number 2 pick potentially to the Dallas Cowboys, and they would be able to then use that pick to select Shedeur Sanders, and you get out with a haul of whatever it's going to be. Picks, players, combination of both. And that's the key thing here, because if you're the Browns, you can ask for a lot for the rights to draft Shedeur Sanders, and understanding like Dallas has no leverage if that's the player that they want. If they really want Shedeur Sanders that bad, fine, come and get him, but here's our price. And I think part of that price tag could be Dak Prescott. Yes, I finally said the name. I finally got there. Sorry, it was a long-winded way to get you to the point that I think the Browns could theoretically trade for Dak Prescott. Now, what's hard about this deal is that from a financial standpoint for the Cowboys, it doesn't make a ton of sense to trade Dak, because his base salary figures are just so astronomical for the next couple of years. It's $47 million plus in 2025. It's $40 million in 2026, $45 million in 27, and then $55 million in 2028. So there's some massive figures that what I meant to say was, from the Browns standpoint, those numbers are crazy to be taking on given the situation they're in, Deshaun's contract being on the books, all those different things. For Dallas, there are some decent payouts from the signing bonus standpoint that they'd have to eat. $28 million this year, $15 million in 2026, $15 million in 2027, and $15 million in 2028. Plus, there's a restructure bonus on there that they'd have to sort of factor in. So, like, if they were to trade him, the cap hit for them is, $89 million based off the signing bonus money and everything that they've kind of deferred for later. Now they can spread that out over multiple years, depending on like if it's a post June 1 trade, but obviously that wouldn't work in this scenario because you're trying to trade him for the draft pick or whatever. But yeah, like there's obviously a massive cap hit that comes with it for Dallas that they'd have to sort of finagle and figure out. But the Browns could, but here's the thing. I don't want to go as far as saying the cap is a myth, but that is a common phrase in NFL circles because the cap largely is a myth. And we see that firsthand with the Browns because Andrew Berry's constantly just moving money around, kicking the can on the road. It's what he's done with Deshaun Watson. And the Browns, who are taking on those mega figures I mentioned, the $47 million in base, $40 million in base, $45 million in base, $55 million in base, those figures would basically become what you've been doing with the Deshaun Watson contract. You move them around, you spread the money out. No one's the wiser. You add voided years. The Browns already do this with everybody's contracts anyway. So what's the difference with one more if you're trying to sort of stay competitive? And the reason, and that's just the finances of it. It makes it a little bit difficult. I agree, but it can always be worked out. It can always be ironed out because again, the salary cap is so malleable. You can mold it into whatever you need it to be for any given year, just based on how you allocate the money. Now, from a quarterbacking standpoint, maybe some of you are hearing this and rolling your eyes, and you're like, "What the hell is Spencer talking about? I don't want Dak Prescott." But here's the thing. I spent the better part of the last year plus hearing fans argue to me that all the Browns need is average quarterback play to level things out and be competitive. I heard that about Deshaun this year, coming off the shoulder injury. It was like, if he can just play average, this team could go places because the defense is good. We saw it was a disaster. He didn't play even close to average. He was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, if not the worst. Dak is, no matter how you feel about him, if you think he's great, if you think he's bad, he is without question a middle of the, he's no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, he's at least going to fall in the middle group of quarterbacks here, as at least the top half of the NFL in terms of quarterback play. And again, if that's all the Browns really need, and you should be on board with this trade, even if you're not the biggest Dak Prescott fan. Maybe you are a big Dak Prescott fan and you think he's, a top 10 guy. And I think there's moments in his career where he's played like a top 10 quarterback. He was in the MVP conversation in 2023 before sort of a bad end of the season that sort of cost him having a better shot at winning the award. But he's proven to you he can play at a high level at times, and sometimes there's a drop off there. But at the very least, that makes him a middle of the road quarterback. And all I heard for months and months and months was that was all Deshaun Watson needed to be. So if that's your goal, and no, you don't like a lot of the other veteran options out there, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, whatever, and maybe you're not sold on these draft picks, or maybe you are sold on the draft picks, but maybe the Browns aren't sold on the draft picks, and they're going to look for a veteran. Dak Prescott is the perfect veteran for this team right now. He can stabilize the position for a little while, give you some at least solid quarterback play that you can trust for the most part, while you sort of figure out what you're going to do next, what your next move is going to be at the position if you really don't like this class of quarterbacks coming out. And I still think they take one in the later round anyway, but if you don't like the top two guys and think like they're the franchise game-changing quarterbacks, then you don't, or if the Cowboys are going to force the issue and try to get Shedeur Sanders from you, then you kind of just got to roll with the punches there and take what's available to you. And Dak, I think, would fill that void the best way possible for a team that doesn't have the best options at that position right now anyway. And maybe you can get another pick from them next year that you can use to package up to trade up for, your franchise-changing quarterback that you're looking for. I don't know all the other details that would kind of go into this. I can't specify like specifically what picks would be on the table along with Dak being part of the trade. But I think like this is the best of both worlds. It gives you a quarterback that's solid, at least better than some of the other options that are being thrown out there. Doesn't make you forced to take a rookie necessarily if you don't love these guys. It's a perfect scenario. And I say that knowing that it's pie in the sky right now because it all revolves around Deion Sanders even taking the Cowboys job, which we don't even know if that's going to happen. But just throwing it out there for some fun on a Friday. I hope you enjoyed it. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. I appreciate you joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team here in the off season. There'll be plenty more to come in the weeks and months ahead. I hope you continue to make us your first listen every day. For your second listen, go check out a new Locked On NFL show, or if you want to keep it local, you can check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, but for now, I'm out. Catch you later, Cleveland.